In this video, I'm going to take a look at some Barry Harris systems, Barry Harris concepts over rhythm changes. It's this idea of harmonic movement. He calls this movement. So two different movements that we're going to use over rhythm changes specifically. I have talked about this in the previous videos, and you kind of need to know what the Barry Harris system is if you want to follow along in this video. There are plenty of videos on this topic, and I have a few that I will link to all that. I recommend the channel Things I Learned from Barry Harris, and I recommend starting from the beginning if you're new to kind of the Barry Harris systems. And there's another channel called Labyrinth of Limitations, I think, and I have explored that channel quite a lot lately, and I will link to that one as well. I'll just get started and then I'll explain as we go why this is a good idea to do and how I came up with this system. So this is not Barry Harris. He said a lot of things about rhythm changes. I don't claim to have all that information. I'm not an expert on that. This is how I take some of his ideas and use it in my own playing. And for me, it was a revelation when I realized that you can use this idea over rhythm changes. It really helped me a lot because rhythm changes can be a little bit of a mystery. It was to me anyway. So looking at it from this kind of perspective helped me a lot, and hopefully it will help you as well. So let's get started, shall we? So rhythm changes in B flat. I guess most jazz books would tell you to play B flat, major 7, G minor 7, C minor 7 to F7. That's the kind of default progression that this whole thing is based on. And obviously it's that tune, I Got Rhythm, right? Over the years, people have added more and more stuff to this, but we're gonna simplify it. All we're gonna do, the first movement, all we're gonna do is we're gonna go from a B flat 6 to an E flat 6. So that this is the 1 chord, and this is the 4 chord. But the 1 chord is also the 6 minor, right? They're the same thing. The B flat 6 and G minor 7. It's the same notes. So we are covering the first bar there, and the next bar. And you might say, well, there's an F there, but we're just gonna ignore that for now. Also notice the voices. If I use this specific voicing here, the top and the bottom notes are going to stay, and the middle voices are going to go down one step. And if we use a chromatic movement, we get this. So that's the first movement we're going to use. So if I have this chord progression, I can play that. That totally works. That means that we can use this as lines as well. I'm going to do that in a second. So this would be drop 2 voicings on the top set of strings. You should be able to do that in all the inversions. So I'm moving kind of fast here because I'm hoping, or I'm suspecting that most of you have done that kind of work with all the inversions. And I could just give you all the inversions, but it's better that you figure it out yourself. But if you are confused by it and you want all of those inversions and all the possibilities laid out, there is this book, Barry Harris, Harmonic Method for Guitar by Alan Kingston, which I have talked about also in a previous video, and I can't say enough good things about this book. It's one of the best books I have seen, and it's one of those books I wish I had 30 years ago. It would have made things a lot easier. So you should be able also to move these to a different set of strings. So instead of the top 4 strings, the middle 4 strings could be this. Let's do with this voicing. That's a great chord, great voicing. Again, you want to be aware of which notes that are moving and which voices that are staying. The 4 bottom strings. I love these voicings. This is a great voicing. And this too. So if this is the 5th and another 5th, which gives it kind of a quintal harmony sound. And this is the 4th and the 4th. Like 2 fourths stacked a third apart. You might think that this kind of playing sounds old school because it's pre-bebop. It's what we're aiming for. But ironically, I think these chords sound modern because of the 5ths. Like Lagerlund would totally play this and this. But if I move up an inversion, I get this. You should do all the inversions, but there's all these other things you can do. You can remove voices, omit voices. So if you omit the second lowest voice, the tenor, I like to think of them as voices. I get this. Which is super common. You get these, this is an open triad, open diminished triad, and a shell voicing. And you could play the F like that. If you're a Django enthusiast like I am and play gypsy jazz, every other tune starts like this. I mean, so many tunes have that progression, and that is, I don't even want you to think of it as a progression. I want you to think of it as movement, harmonic movement, rather than a chord progression. So, that tune, and also ballads like Embraceable You, well, it starts like that. It could be an intro to any Django style tune, pretty much, more or less. Not all of them, but a lot of them starts like that. If we go back to the first set of strings and drop the lowest notes, the bass voice, we get this. And that's a tune, that's a Django tune called Mikko. He plays it in G. So it's a good thing to study the tunes, the rhythm changes tunes that came before bebop and Charlie Parker. I've always been intrigued by how people played rhythm changes before bebop. And anytime I try to ask a teacher when I was trying to learn all this stuff, how do you play rhythm changes? They were like, yeah, you can add these chords and add these chromatic 2/5s, and there's this thing you can do, and Coltrane changes. But I was always wondering, well, how did Coleman Hawkins play over rhythm changes? How did the earlier jazz players play over rhythm changes? And the chords that people play in that Mikko tune is this. Which is this movement, and that's also rhythm changes, but it's like, it's not, the kind of stuff that we see when we look at a Charlie Parker rhythm changes tune. I'm not saying we shouldn't study a Charlie Parker rhythm changes. That's an integral part of understanding jazz. Charlie Parker is like one of the most important players to study, but here we're looking at something else, is what I'm trying to say. So basically this and this, it's the same thing, it's just different inversions. And then there's all this other stuff you can do. You can borrow notes, and you can you can double notes, right? That you could play. I could double the lowest note, put it on top, like that. That sounds good, but it's kind of hard to do. Let's listen to that. Again, it kind of gives you like a big band like Count Basie. And again, if you want to explore that kind of stuff, this book is all about that stuff. You can create shell voicings, you can create triads, and the YouTube channels I mentioned earlier, the Labyrinth of Limitations, and things I learned from Barry Harris, they explore tons of this stuff. So there's so much information out there if you really want to look into this stuff. It's also kind of fascinating that this is this, right? It's like a turnaround. You can make that minor. Okay, now let's try to play these as arpeggios. If I play them just straight up, the arpeggios, B flat 6, B flat diminished, E flat 6, sounds like that. I should also mention that the last or the first ending, every time the kind of chord progression ends, I don't do that. I do something else. So it's like second time, third time. But here I'll play B flat, F, B flat. So it kind of ties everything together. And there I would use different material. So we'll look at that a little bit more later on. So I'm just playing the chords as arpeggios. And of course, there's so much you could do with that. You try to create lines, try to add rhythm, edit notes. And we're not using any voice leading. I'm just playing them. But it's easy, I think, to kind of jump ahead and it's like, oh, I know this stuff now, I'm gonna start playing all this crazy stuff. No, you want to make sure that you really have these under your fingers, because we are not used to playing 6 chord arpeggios. I was always told to play major 7 arpeggios. Or even G7. And then maybe... and then F minor. That's how I was kind of taught to try to play rhythm changes, and I remember feeling kind of limited by that, because it's like, oh, I have to play this chord now and this chord. I wanted something that can kind of free me from that, and well, this is the answer. And remember, there's one more movement we're gonna look at later. So you want to be able to play these starting from the other chord tones as well. So if you start from 6, that's a better fingering. Maybe the opposite. Starting from the 5th. I would like that. And from the 3rd. So I have these little arpeggios written out as PDFs that you can get access to if you become a subscriber on Patreon. So now you might be wondering, well, what does it sound like if I play these arpeggios over a regular backing track of how we normally play rhythm changes? So let's find a backing track. I go to YouTube, and there's so many rhythm changes backing tracks online. So Phil Whittleson is a YouTube channel where you can find really nice backing tracks. So I'll play one of his backing tracks, and I'll play these arpeggios over that, and we shall see what that sounds like. If I didn't tell you that I was doing that kind of approach, or using that kind of approach, you might not have noticed. You would just think, well, he's playing rhythm changes, right? So let's look at the other movement, which is the opposite, going up instead of, which is kind of like this thing, right? I remember I was lifting a solo by a gypsy jazz guitar player, Adrien Monniard, and he was doing this over rhythm changes. And I thought to myself, how does that work? Because it shouldn't work, right? It's not the same chords. Let's say the bass player is playing. And you're going. There's the same thing. Rhythm changes is more than just 1, 6, 2, 5, because then you have this F minor, B flat, E flat, E diminished. I think originally it was this, right? B flat to B flat dominant, or with a third Well, there it is. That's also a rhythm changes chord progression. Again, we don't think of it as chord progressions, but movement. It all kind of works. So if the bass player is playing, we're thinking, it all works because we kind of, it's just movement. That's also a tune, right? Django tune, a Daphne. But we don't have to think about that flat 7. We can just play a 6 chord. So we're starting on the B flat, and then Adrian Monniard was playing this chord with a flat 7. So this is a little bit more nice without the flat 7. Again, know all your inversions. And so on and so forth. So if I want to play that as lines, I could do something like this, right? And I have made a little backing track for myself in Ireal Pro. So you can always go in and find the rhythm changes. So the app Ireal Pro. You take a rhythm changes tune and then you go into edit. You can change the chords so that you get these chords instead. So you want to practice it both over the more conventional rhythm changes chords, also over actual these chords, as if you were playing in the early jazz style. But if you go into edit in Ireal Pro, remember to use the duplicate function, because then otherwise you don't have access to the original changes anymore if you want to go back. So always use that function. So if I play these as arpeggios over that, it could sound like this, or it does sound like this. I'm gonna play it an octave higher instead. Let's just go over the other chord tones. So starting on the third, I'm just gonna loop this section here. So let's start on the third of each chord. From the fifth. There it is. Do that again. From the sixth. By the way, if I play these as like that, you get this thing. We've all seen that, you know. That thing, so. Well, there it is. The notes that are outside of the key is the C sharp or D flat and the E. Those are kind of the bluesy notes in the key. They're also a half step below a chord tone. This we can use to create this kind of bluesy sound. So instead of thinking blues scale, we're thinking diminished arpeggio. So we can create kind of a voice leading. If I find the notes that are not the same in E flat 6 to diminished and create a line. It could be something like this. Then there's voice leading. Let's see what that sounds like. Or maybe something like this. This last note you probably want to resolve to the F. So the diminished arpeggio can be used to create this kind of blues feeling. We can go back to the previous movement and do the same thing, maybe something like... Let's say I have a normal rhythm changes progression, you know. F minor. I could try these lines. They're gonna sound good, I hope. Maybe. Or maybe this. You know, you could actually use the Barry Harris major diminished, just play a 6 arpeggio, and then the diminished arpeggio, and then the B flat 6. So I'm just playing a B flat 6 arpeggio and then the diminished arpeggio. I think he calls it on and off. So the B flat 6 arpeggio is the on, and the diminished arpeggio between is the off. Maybe try some kind of Thelonious Monk inspired idea, like something like that last chord, the E flat, could be minor too, right? So then it would be E flat minor 6 instead of diminished. that also works. There's so many things you can do. I have a video I made a few years ago on rhythm changes where I talk about this stuff, thinking about it, but not from a Barry Harris perspective. I didn't know about the Barry Harris stuff back then. So again, these ideas, I have a PDF of them on my Patreon page. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons. I had a Zoom meeting with my patrons this month, a few of them, and I think I was a little I gave too short notice, so I have to find a way to kind of make sure that everybody knows when those are happening. They're happening on the first Sunday of each month, and I got some really good ideas for future lessons there, so thank you. And again, I'll link to where you can buy this book in the description below, and let me know if you find this stuff helpful or if it was confusing or if you have any questions. And as always, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.